Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Initially, I was planning this video before WWDC 2024 and I was going to say that iPhones tend to hold their value very well and usually they expire after around 5 years. But then WWDC 2024 happened and with it, Apple made the newly released iPhone 15 obsolete. So now the question is more relevant than ever. What's your iPhone's expiration date? Historically, iOS updates meant that all iPhones that supported the new iOS were getting major new features. This built up the hype around new iOS releases, and because of this, iPhones were praised for their OS support over their lifetime. Usually, each iPhone would get around 5 years of iOS updates. Obviously, there were a few outliers like the iPhone 5S, which got 7 years of iOS updates, and the 3GS only got 3 years of iOS updates. But Apple generally aims for 5 years of iOS support. However, with every new iOS, the older models would get fewer major features. Mostly, the last 2 to 3 iPhones would get all the new features of the latest iOS, effectively cutting down that 5-year support to 2 or 3 years of full iOS support. Apple has always been ahead of the CPU game by at least 2 or 3 years, so they started allowing themselves to put their previous year's chip in their new iPhones, beginning with the iPhone 14, which got the same chip from the iPhone 13 Pro, so the iPhone 14 was using a 1-year-old chip at its release. Apple's main excuse was that their chips were ahead of the game anyway, so even with an older chip they'd still be ahead, which to some extent was true, but the competition was quickly catching up, and with that came consequences. Today we find ourselves in the position that the iPhone 15, which was just released last September, is already obsolete. iOS 18 has just one major update, which is Apple Intelligence, and guess what? The iPhone 15 doesn't support it, just because it doesn't have the power to do so. Just a few months prior, Apple was saying that the new MacBooks come with 8 gigs of RAM because 8 gigs on macOS is the same as 16 gigs on Windows. And now they can't run the single new feature of iOS 18 on their latest smartphone. Imagine how disappointed everyone who has an iPhone 15 will be when iOS 18 comes out of beta this September. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Reels and whatnot will be full of Apple Intelligence hype. Everyone will want to try it out just to find out that their iPhone 15 does not support it. Apple knows they've made a mistake. Rumors suggest that the new iPhone 16 and iPhone 16 Pro, which will come out this September, will all feature the same A18 chip and 8 gigs of RAM. Apple is still going to be Apple, so most likely the base model iPhone 16 will get a bent-down A18 chip with slower RAM, while the iPhone 16 Pro will get an A18 Pro chip with faster RAM. For those of you who don't know what a bent-down chip means, it's basically a chip that didn't meet the highest standard during manufacturing. These chips are still used but with reduced performance to ensure stability. Bent-down chips are very common in the industry, so Apple is not trying to screw you over here. They're just trying to make the most out of the production line. Ever since the notorious iPhone 4, which would shatter just by looking at it, and the iPhone 5, which had problems with peeling color, iPhones have become more and more durable over time. Nowadays, you could just go caseless and not end up with a cracked phone just because it fell on your sofa. To be honest, iPhones have become really great at taking hits. My iPhone 14 Pro, which is almost 2 years old by now, has been used without a case or screen protectors, and it still holds its beauty. It has fallen so many times, screen down on concrete, eyes off the table, out of a pocket, you name it. Obviously, it has some scratches here and there, but the screen is intact. The back glass is intact and the frame has a few dings, but nothing major. So when it comes to durability, iPhones tend to have an insane lifespan, is what I wanted to say. But if we look at the iPhone 15 and 15 Pro, they sacrifice durability for the round edges and comfort in the hand. They tend to break more easily, and the screens, while still great at not cracking, are more likely to suffer from dead pixels or internal damage from hits and falls. To be honest, I don't think this was Apple's intent or done on purpose. It's just that the boxier design is a bit better for durability, but it's not as great for ergonomics, so Apple just switched to a rounded design for that reason. I understand Apple's intent with this design change, and I believe they will keep on improving the iPhone's durability. To be honest, the 15s are still very durable and capable of taking some hits. So when it comes to the durability of chassis and screen, iPhones tend to have a very good lifespan. The battery tends to last 2 to 3 years before it goes down to 80%, effectively matching the years that an iPhone would get full iOS updates. Convenient. Maybe the degraded battery is the reason the iPhone stops getting major updates. Must be a coincidence. Anyway, you could always replace the battery for cheap. However, not everybody knows about that, so when the battery finally hits 80%, people will usually go on a rant about how Apple slowed down their iPhone. And by the way, Apple does not slow down your iPhone with iOS updates. The reason your iPhone becomes slower over time is that once the battery starts degrading, it can no longer provide the same power to the CPU, which has to lower its demand for power and hence deliver less performance. If Apple allowed the CPU to still draw the same amount of power from a degraded battery, let's say, your iPhone would just shut down every time it needed to do something power intensive. Remember how that was the case with the iPhone 5, 5S and 6, which would just turn off in the cold. So if you wanted to do something power intensive in the cold, your degraded battery would have to deliver more power than it's capable of, which would just result in a crash or a shutdown. Obviously, Apple doesn't want that to happen, so they allow the CPU to run on lower clocks just to keep your iPhone stable, which then results in a slower running iPhone, and you might think that Apple slowed down your iPhone with iOS updates, but in reality your battery is just degraded. Once you replace the battery, your iPhone will run just as fast as it once did. Another reason it might be running slow is because of filled up system data, which I have a video about, but that's besides the point of this video. The iPhone 14 and 15 have significantly worse batteries, which tend to degrade much faster. Unfortunately, it seems like that was Apple's intent. They've got to make you upgrade somehow, but you could always buy a battery replacement. And rumor on the street is that the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro will get much better batteries, but that's thanks to the EU, not Apple, so it's not like Apple's trying to make your iPhone last as long as possible. Back in the day, I used to think if Apple can provide 7 years of iOS updates and they're aiming for more, how many iOS updates will get a newer iPhone when it becomes much faster? Turns out not that many. I mean, I get it, they need to sell a new iPhone every year, but also think about this. Every new iOS version tends to add more complex features which require more processing power, so we can't just blame Apple. After all, the software progresses just as fast, if not faster than the hardware. For now, I can say that the iPhone has 2 lifespans. Let me explain. One lifespan is in its prime, which tends to be 2 to 3 years when the battery hasn't degraded and every new iOS brings major new updates to the iPhone, and the second one, we'll call it middle life, when the iPhone just runs well and gets a few updates here and there. Knowing the lifespan of an iPhone also helps you as a consumer if you want to, for example, buy a used iPhone. For example, let's say you want to buy a used iPhone 13 Pro. You know you're gonna get at least 3 more years out of it before it starts becoming an inconvenience. After the middle life usually comes the crisis, and with that comes the need for an upgrade. The iPhone 15 seems to be an outlier, but the good thing is it doesn't seem like it was Apple's intent to make it a bad phone. More likely it's just that they got caught red-handed with all the AI hype that's going on around, and they decided to add it last minute into the iPhone, and it just so happened that the iPhone 15 is just not capable of running Apple Intelligence. So my recommendation is to upgrade every 2 to 3 years to get the absolute best out of your iPhone, and every 3 to 5 years if you want to get the absolute best value for your money. Everything else just seems impractical. I mean, obviously, if you want to upgrade every year, go ahead and do that, but you're not going to get much for that. And on the opposite side, carrying a 6 or 7-year-old iPhone is just not going to help you. So whether you're looking to get the most performance or the best value for your money, or simply keep up with the latest features, understanding the lifespan of your iPhone will help you make the best decision. If this video is helpful to you, please like and consider subscribing for more tech videos. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one.